In 1991, 5 young boys went missing in South Korea while on a simple hike. For days, thousands searched for them, but no one could find them. And it would take more than a decade before the truth, or what little we know of it, was finally uncovered. It was the morning of March 26, 1991, in the city of Daegu, South Korea. The air carried that crisp, early morning chill, the kind where winter is finally loosening its grip, but warmth hasn't quite settled in. That day was a national holiday, so kids from across the school were free from school, spending their time the way kids do, playing, exploring, or chasing little adventures. In the small neighborhood of Dalseo district, 5 young boys aged between 9 and 13 gathered together like they always did. They weren't troublemakers. They were just normal kids, boys who enjoyed running around the hills near their homes, just curious about nature and little creatures they could find. That morning, their mission was simple: go catch salamanders on the slopes of Mount Woryan, a low mountain that rested not far away from their houses. It was the kind of outing that didn't raise any alarms. Parents had seen it countless times. Kids setting up with sticks, bags, and excitement in their voices, promising to return before evening. At first, their absence didn't feel alarming. Kids lose track of time, they get carried away. Parents assumed they would come walking in at sunset, tired and muddy. Yet as hours stretched into the night, the mood shifted. Lights went on across the neighborhood, and voices filled the streets. Parents, neighbors, and friends began calling out the boys' names. Flashlights cut through the darkness of Mount Woryan. Still nothing. By midnight, panic had set in. By dawn, it was no longer a neighborhood search. Hundreds of locals scoured the hillsides. Police arrived, and soon after military joined in. Over 300,000 people would eventually look for the boys in one of the largest manhunts South Korea had ever seen. Every cave was checked, every trail combed. Helicopters flew overhead, clinging to the hope that the boys had simply gotten lost. But there was no trace, not a shoe, not a shirt, not a single clue. Rumors spread quickly. Some said they had run away. Others whispered about kidnappings or even North Korean spies. But there was no evidence to back any of it. The case dragged on, the years passed, and the parents' grief became a national story. The missing children were known to everyone as the Frog Boys, a name that came from the original reports claiming they had gone out searching for frogs. 11 years later, a man hiking near Mount Woryan stumbled upon something that later shocked the entire world. At first, he almost brushed it off, thinking maybe it wasn't even such a big deal. But as he looked closer, things didn't feel right. There were some bones. At first, he thought they were just animals' bones. But then he saw clothing, small shoes, and that's when he realized what it really was. The Frog Boys had been found, their remains discovered in a shallow area covered by leaves and dirt. The initial reports tried to soften the blow. Authorities claimed the boys had died of hypothermia, suggesting they had gotten lost and succumbed to the cold. But this explanation quickly fell apart, as forensic examination revealed something far darker. Something was revealed that shocked the entire world for a second time. And here is what happened to the boys. On that day, as they were hiking up the familiar slopes of Mount Worion, no one could have imagined what would follow. The boys were playful, carrying sticks, talking loudly, doing what children always do. But somewhere along those trails, something went wrong. As they were hiking, they encountered someone who they thought was just another hiker. But no, he was a local hunter. Mount Worion was a known hunting area back then, and it wasn't uncommon for men to wander those hills with shotguns slung over their shoulders. At a point when he feels that they are all by themselves, he attacks them with the back of his rifle, and he kills all 5 of them. However, this is just a theory. Some say maybe the boys disrupted someone, perhaps by accident, or perhaps they were mistaken for animals in the brush. The injuries on their skulls could match a blunt weapon, or even the butt of a rifle. If true, it would mean the deaths were accidental, but the hiding of the bodies was deliberate. Another theory points toward law enforcement or military involvement. At the time, South Korea was under tense political climate, and the area around Daegu had military activity. Some locals whispered that the boys might have stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see, or even ammunition storage or a restricted training site. The idea is that someone in the authorities silenced them and then covered it up. This would also explain why the massive search operation missed the bodies in 1991, but they were found 11 years later in the very same area. Some parents of the Frog Boys believed strongly in a covered-up. They pointed to the sloppy investigation, the lost evidence, and the strange inconsistencies in official reports. Why, for instance, did police claim hypothermia while skull fractures told a totally different story? Why was the discovery site overlooked despite being within the original search radius? For many, it felt less like incompetence and more like something intentionally hidden. Even today, decades later, none of these theories have been proven. The case remains open, unsolved, and heavy with unanswered questions. What started as a day of childhood adventure, a day to catch frogs with friends, ended in silence, in grief, and in questions that may never be answered. So now you are a detective and think as deep as you can to solve this case by answering these questions. Who could do something so unimaginable to a group of innocent teenagers? Why did it take 11 years for their remains to be discovered in an area that had already been searched? Who, if anyone, could have attacked the boys without leaving a trace at the time? If the boys were really killed by the government, why did they allow the country's largest search to happen in the first place? And if the government had done it, why didn't they simply move or hide the bodies after the search had ended?